Hey guys, this is Mel, and I'm here to talk about a new show that is Kung Fu, which premiered Wednesday, April 7th, 2021 on the CW. It is a reboot of the 1972 version with David Carradine, although now it's predominantly with an Asian American cast. Huge excitement for this show. First off, just want to say that I'm recording on April 11th. It's been a few days. For the delay is because I'm just starting a new program for school, and there's a lot of required readings. But I do want to watch the episode again, but I wanted to record what my first impressions were first before I do that. So this is where the recording comes in. So if you've seen any of my other videos, my formatting is going to be slightly different. If you're brand new to the channel, this is clearly just meant to be a first impression. I am coming from a screenwriter background recently where I had to study structure, especially when it came to like TV shows and dramas, which is kind of why I'm interested in the pilot episode specifically for new shows, because this is the episode that's meant to draw in an audience. This is the episode that had networks interested first to even invest their time and money into the show. So I kind of want to break it down, see if there's elements that I picked up from my studies, and also just want to see what questions I come from it to want me to watch the show. Because usually when it comes to a new show, I usually give it 2 episodes to really form my thoughts about it, because the first episode usually establishes the jumping off point or the inciting incident for the characters, and like why the show is now being why are we focusing on this character now in this point in their life. The second episode usually now takes on the format of what the rest of the series is meant to go forward. So if it's meant to be episodic, then chances are episode 2 is probably going to be the first true episodic format you're going to get. If it's more serialized, then yes, episode 2 is usually going to let you know like what kind of the pacing is going to be, what kind of things you're going to like touch upon and stuff like that. So with this episode, with my video, I want to talk about a few different things, but I just want to say huge spoiler alert. If you haven't seen the episode already, please go do so first, and then come back and see what I have to say about the episode. Other reminders are up on screen. Take a moment to remind yourselves of those. Again, first impressions, genuine impressions. And also, since this is a reboot of the 1972 series, which had David Carradine playing in the lead role, I haven't seen that. I do remember my parents watching that back in the day, but I haven't seen it, so there's definitely you're not going to get any comparisons with me. Plus, also, this version of Kung Fu is actually a predominantly Asian American cast, which I'm loving already, but we'll get right into it now. So the video format is going to be talking about characters, then we're going to go into storylines that I picked up in the episode specifically. Then we're going into the actual breakdown of the episode, a little bit more further detailed of what happened in between. Then we'll go into my favorite moments and favorite moments, and then my peeved moments of the episode. And then we'll go into my questions that I have strictly from what the pilot has left us off with, and then predictions of what I think will come. So let's start off with characters. So we got our protagonist being Nikki Shen. We find out that she is, from what I gathered from the first time watching, she dropped out of Harvard. She pretty much had 1 month left to go before graduation, and she ran off to stay in a monastery in China, where she was there for 3 years. After her mother tried to, I think, matchmake her with an Asian guy when she was already in a relationship with a non-Asian who we meet. So there's that. While she's at the monastery, we meet Pei Ling, who is Nikki's mentor. She's actually killed in this episode, and it's what jumpstarts Nikki's search for answers in the series, I'm assuming. So we have that, but she does appear throughout the episode too. We got Althea, which is Nikki's sister. I don't know if she's older or younger. I wasn't able to distinguish which of the siblings, like what the ordering was for their ages. But Nikki comes home just when Althea is engaged to Dennis, her fiance, and like former mathlete, as Nikki remembers him as. But Althea, so she's coming home when they're about to like arrange for the engagement and announce a date for the wedding. But Althea has her own software startup. So she's very tech savvy. And then we have their brother Ryan, who is a medical student, or he works at the Chinese Community Center in the clinic. I don't know if he's graduated or not. I'm assuming so. But we also find out that he's the one that kind of resents Nikki the most, because pretty much she up and left him, because she was his only support system. And at the time, 3 years ago, he confided in her that he was gay, and she was the first and only one in the family that knew this. And then when she left 3 years ago, he kind of was left alone. And then I think by the time Nikki returns, his family has only known about his sexuality for a year, I believe. And it was met with mixed emotions from their parents. But with Nikki, it hurt the most for him, because she kind of left him kind of alone during those moments. But it seemed like they were on good terms by the end of the episode. But we'll get to that later. But then we have other parents. So we got Jin, which is their father. He's very welcoming to Nikki coming home and trying to get her to stay, while her mother, Mei Ling, she pretty much, when Nikki comes home, announces that her daughter has been dead for 3 years. So she really took Nikki leaving as a huge betrayal. Even though we do find out later on in the episodes, there are some similarities between them in regards to like running off from their parents' expectations and stuff like that. So we have that. We also find out that they own a family restaurant in Chinatown. And they had some money troubles. And that is kind of where a huge chunk of the episode is focusing on, is trying to get this family out of financial debt when the collectors come for it. So there's that. We also meet Evan, who is Nikki's ex-boyfriend that her mom tried to put a wedge between them. He likes to cycle, or likes to ride a bike. For exercise, for travel, for work, don't know. But literally his opening shot was him coming back from a bike ride. He's also assistant district attorney. So again, not a cyclist by trade, but he's an assistant district attorney. It seems like he wasn't that level when he was with Nikki 3 years previously. But we also find out that he's moved on with his new girlfriend, Sabine. So there's that. Though Evan seems to have close relations with Nikki's family. Like, it's not odd for him to be hanging out with them. Like, even to the point where Evan and Sabine were invited to Althea's engagement party. So it's not like there was no bad blood between Evan and Nikki's family when she left, from the looks of it. And then we meet Henry. Henry actually works at the Chinese Community Center. I believe he's one of I think he's the Tai Chi instructor there. But he's also kind of like a historian. He's very interested in culture. And he's kind of the go-to guy that Nikki goes to when it comes to the trying to figure out Paling's killer and the culture behind the sword that was suddenly taken. And there's also a connection between him and Nikki that they're trying to start up. And Ryan tends to tease about. But it looks like also that Ryan and Henry also are friends before Nikki arrives, because of the community center. Don't know to what extent, though, they're friends. So keep that in mind. Now, when it comes to storylines, though, so usually in drama series, there's usually 3 different storylines that writers tend to at least focus on. You got the A storyline, which is pretty much the main driving force of the episode. I refer to it as the storyline that you are essentially going to remember that episode for. So it's like, say, if you want specifically the Halloween episode, that's probably your A storyline, because it's the one, it begins and ends in that episode, is what the A storyline is. And then you got your B storyline. That's usually love and relationships. Sometimes it's on the back burner. Sometimes it's 50-50 with the A storyline. But usually it's either like romantic relationships, or it could be familial relationships, it could be friendships, anything of the sort. There's usually something there. And then you got the C storyline. C storyline can either be something really small that's like in the back burner of like maybe like a second storyline that begins and ends in the episode, or it's something that's like overarching of the full seasons or overarching over multiple episodes. So for me, I usually deem it as the big season arc. What plays into the bigger storyline focus of the season. So that's usually the takeaway from school. So when it comes to the pilot episode, A storyline is pretty much trying to stop Tony. Is it Tony or Tommy? I think it's Tony. Stopping Tony, who is trying to get the money back that he lent out to Nikki's parents, but with more interest. So I think he's the leader of like the triad, I believe, that's taking over Chinatown. So stopping him and trying to get their parents out of like immediate danger is the focus of story A. Story B, though, is the fact that Nikki's returning home to her family after 3 years apart, and she's trying to reconnect with all of them. So it's a lot of side relationship storylines for Nikki, but it's her trying to make amends with her family, with Evan even. So there's that. And then the third storyline is Nikki's quest to trying to find Zealand and get the sword that she stole from the monastery before she collects the remaining 7. I believe they're all swords, but the 7 weapons that are meant to come together and like unleash this power. And that seems to be what the focus of the big season mystery is going to be. So that's something with that. Now with the pilot breakdown specifically. So usually for a drama series, you have it broken up into teaser and then 5 acts. Usually each break is done with a commercial. It's a little bit harder to find when you go to shows that are exclusively on streaming sites because they don't have to worry about commercials. What I did find interesting, though, about this episode was the fact that it was a teaser and 6 acts. Unless the teaser and then the title card and then Act 1, they consider that all the tease, which I don't think I don't think it does, but that's the only other way I could think of. Like, why would you have a tease in 6 acts as opposed to a tease in 5 acts? So that was something I wasn't expecting to find. But here we go. So I'm going to kind of break it down very, very briefly. Hopefully it's briefly. But with pretty much the teaser of the episode, this is like the first opening sequence that you get before you get the title card of Kung Fu, is set at the monastery. We get an introduction of Nikki, we get the introduction of how she ended up in the monastery, and then we get the attack, which leads to Pei-Ling's murder, and then Nikki facing off against Ziling and the sword being stolen and her getting burned by it, and then her getting kicked off a cliff, Nikki. And then it cuts to the title card, and then we cut back to Nikki returning to San Francisco and reuniting with her family. We see that her dad and her sister are both welcoming towards her, but her mom and her brother feel betrayed by her leaving, so they're kind of standoffish against her. We try to get some apologies before Nikki goes to Evan, where she shares what happened to her in China that led her to come back home. And he kind of can't get involved in a way, like his hands are kind of tied in a certain way. But he still lends an ear. He's also kind of hurt that she left the way that she did 3 years ago, which is understandable, but there's that. Then we also get Nikki having a hallucination. Here's the thing. When Nikki's on the waterfront, she gets a visit from Pei-Ling. I don't know if this is like an actual like hallucination that Nikki conjures up for herself as a grieving mechanism, or if it's something spiritual where like Nikki has now unlocked the power to actually communicate with Pei-Ling's spirit, because something happened when Nikki touched that sword. Yes, she got burned, but something has to have happened. So I can't tell the source of the hallucinations just yet. But Pei-Ling keeps telling Nikki that fate brought her home. She must heal with her family. Like, she's been sent on this quest for a purpose, kind of a thing. So when Nikki goes to check on her dad at the family restaurant, this is where she finds him beaten up in the alleyway. And she does not know why. Now we cut into Act 2. Act 2 is when Dad's in the hospital, family's there waiting to hear news back from him, and then when the mom goes to sit with the dad, the siblings go back to, or there's some tensions between them. Yeah, there's tensions between them, and then when do they talk? Yeah, that's not until later. Okay, so there's tensions between them, but then Nikki goes to the Chinese Community Center, which is where her brother works. She wants to try to talk to him, see reason, and try to mend fences between them. But this is where she also meets Henry. And so when Nikki squares things off with Ryan, she then goes and talks to Henry about the sword and the legend. And this is where we learn a little bit more about the legend behind this sword and the creation of the monastery and the warriors that came from it. And the fact that she shows him the burn on her hand, which from the sword also left imprints because there was engravings on the sword's handle. And when it burned Nikki, those symbols burnt into her hand. So Henry takes a look at it, and he really wants to look into this and research about it. So she lets him. And then Nikki goes and visits her father, and this is where she finds out from her parents about Tony and then borrowing money and then being kind of when the rent got raised in Chinatown, but then also being confronted saying now you owe twice as much due to interest. And now they only have 72 hours to pay the money back or they kill the father and take over the restaurant. And then you cut into Act 3. So Act 3 then starts with Nikki talking with her siblings about what to do with Tony. And like what he's been doing to terrorize their community. They decide that they have to be the ones to question people in Chinatown to figure out who else is under Tony's thumb. And they also recruit Henry to help them out too. This is where you get a bit of a montage of them going through all these questionings of the people, and they get turned down. We do see Nikki hallucinating Pei Ling along the way before Henry interrupts and tells her a little bit more about the research he found about the sword, until Nikki finds out about their latest lead from her sibling Cindy, and she goes to talk to her. While she's talking to Cindy, Nikki sees two intimidating dudes approach her siblings and pretty much threaten them with a knife. This is where Nikki fights them off solo until Henry steps in. But this is the first time that her siblings and Henry get to see her skills one-on-one. Then we cut into Act 4. Act 4 is when the siblings praise Nikki for her fighting, all before Mom comes in to question them about questioning the community about Tony and getting them into more trouble. But then that gives them into a fight with Nikki, and that leads to kind of a fight / like moment of realization between Nikki and her mom, realizing that like they do have more in common than they realized, kind of a thing. And then they get interrupted by the news that Cindy has arrived, and she agrees to help Nikki expose Tony. And then we go into Act 5. Now that I look at the notes, Act 4 seems kind of small in comparison, but it's a huge emotional shift for sure. More family focused. But Act 5 goes into Nikki going to the police station with Cindy to talk to Evan to make a case against Tony. Evan has his doubts, but Nikki only has 48 hours left. So Evan decides to give all the documents they have on Tony to Nikki's family so they can translate it. And with that, they're able to find his bank accounts. They're able to find where shipments were being done. And they argue over who gets to lead this investigation. Should they do it themselves as a family, or should they hand it over to the police? There's mixed reactions about that. But when the sisters go to the hospital to visit their dad, they realize that their brother is at the docks alone to grab evidence about the shipments that Tony is doing. So Nikki goes to make sure Ryan is not in trouble, but in doing so, they get spotted. So now they're on the run to take cover as shots are being fired at them. So then you cut to the last act of the episode, which is where Nikki fights off Tony's goons. And before she actually fights off against Tony on the rooftop, with Ryan watching from afar, there was a moment on the rooftop where like she gets hurt in the shoulder from the same spot that Ziling kind of like sliced her open. But then it's like a moment, like it kind of looked like she was like tapping into some inner power kind of a thing, which kind of led to her like floating on air, which she describes as it being physics later on. But something happened on that rooftop. But then after everything is done, it's kind of assumed that Tony was arrested. But we go into Althea and Dennis's engagement party where they decide May 24th is the day of the wedding. So a huge engagement party. Henry crashes to talk to Nikki with news about the swords, saying that if someone collects all 8 of these powerful swords, it unlocks this power. So now Nikki is more determined than ever to defy Zeeling to retrieve the first sword and to prevent her from gaining this power. But at this point, Nikki thinks that Zeeling is the true wielder of the sword that she stole, due to the fact that it burned Nikki, but it didn't burn Zeeling when she picked it up. And then we cut to the final scene of the episode is Zeeling having the first sword, putting it in this very propped up display that is set for 8 swords, and we see that it's only 1 that she has collected. So it's not like it's. I feel like we're kind of on like the Thanos trail, where like he's collecting all the Infinity Stones, and the first time we see him is when he only has 1, so his first one. So it's kind of like now, did we see him? The first stone we saw him with was when he only had 1, or did he have 2? Anyways, Zeeling is kind of propped up the same way, where we're just seeing her and the fact that she's trying to find all 8, but she's only found the first of the 8. And that's where it ends there. So first off, let's get into the faves very quickly. I try to narrow it down so that I don't get it too long because of the time right now. What am I at? Pretty good for time. But my favorite moment is actually when Nikki bonds with her siblings. The fact that she got a few moments with her sister Althea, and then she got a few moments with her brother Ryan. And then it was just when all 3 of them came together, and there was, it was just good vibes between all 3 of them, was something I really liked. It's something a little hard. It's also something that I kind of don't like, because of the fact that, like, a lot of the shows you'll find, whoever the protagonist is, you're always going to have them having one male companion and 1 female companion. So in this case, Nikki as the protagonist has 1 brother and 1 sister. So you kind of get the mix of the 2 types of dynamics. What I don't like about that is the fact that I come from a family where I am the only daughter with 2 brothers. So for me, I can understand that dynamic between Nikki and Ryan, but I don't have a connection between Nikki and her sister Althea. And it's something a lot of the times where I'm waiting for a show where it shows a sister having 2 brothers, because that's the only dynamic I know and can recognize. So it's very different too, because luckily with Nikki, she knows what it feels like to have a brother and a sister. If anything, I'm probably going to relate more to relate more to Ryan, because he has to deal with 2 siblings of the opposite sex, which is what I have to deal with. But anyways, I digress. I really like the bonding between the siblings. I can't wait to see that expand even more, especially since the siblings know that Nikki has these martial arts skills. It'll be very interesting to see how far into the series it will take before her parents get clued into the fact that she knows martial arts and to what extent she knows it. I also am surprised that, like, she doesn't hide it, which I'll bring that up later. But one of the peeves I did have, though, in this episode was the fact that Nikki already knew about Zeeling as quickly as she did. She already had the name. She already had a name. She already had a face. So, like, for me, it's like you kind of got rid of the mystery. A part of me kind of wished that Zeeling's identity was concealed, whether her name was left unknown or her face was just not shown, just to keep the mystery alive, because now it's like, well, we automatically know who this person looks like and, like, what the name is. It's kind of like, I like the mystery of, like, you know, like on the Arrowverse, where, like, for, like, in Arrow specifically, in season 1, and we never knew who the Dark Archer was. We're always trying to figure out who's the man behind the Dark Archer mask. It wasn't like we automatically knew the first time we saw the Dark Archer, oh, that's who's under the mask, and then it's the character that's just not knowing. I always like the fact that it's us as the audience don't know who the identity is just as much as the character doesn't know who the identity is, up until like a point where like maybe we get shown the identity maybe the episode before the character finds out. I kind of would have wished that something like that happened in the introduction of Ziling, or the antagonist in this episode, because it also was weird to me that when she went to attack the monastery, everybody else was covered in mask and looking like your typical ninja. But yet here she was, no mask, hair completely out and flowing, where it's like, oh, so if there was a camera at this monastery, you would have been caught on camera and you would have been ID'd with facial recognition, while everybody else you hired would not be, because their face was covered. So it was just a peeve for me. It's like, why would you not want to hide your identity a little bit longer and make it harder for people to find you? And then also it builds up that suspense, because then you have the opportunity to introduce Ziling as a regular civilian in Nikki's world, and we would just think there's nothing wrong with her until later we build suspicion of like, wait a minute, she's not who she says she is, and then find out, oh, she's the one who attacked her from the beginning, you know? So that was the peeve there. I kind of think that they could have built up a little bit more about like who the bad guy was. That's supposed to be lasting for this full season from the looks of it. So that's it there. But let's go on to questions of what I have after seeing this episode. So the first one is that it for Tony's influence over the community, or was he just like one facet of the triad and there's just going to be different leaders coming in, or was that really it? Like she really just took down a huge criminal influence over the businesses in Chinatown, right? Because I thought it'd be more than an episode kind of a thing. But anyways, there's that. Second question is, the sword burned Nikki, but it did not burn Ziling. So who would be the true wielder of the sword? Naturally, you would assume it was Ziling, because she didn't get a reaction from the sword. But a part of me is thinking, well, what if it only burned? Like, what if the sword burning was its reaction to having its owner touch it for the first time? Like, what if that was the signal that, like, oh, you're it? Kind of like with, like, Excalibur, you know how sometimes where... So it's kind of like with Excalibur. If it's the sword in the stone, if the true wielder of the stone is the only one that could take the sword out of the stone, then that's your huge, like, identifier of, like, oh, you're the one kind of a thing. But, like, how else would you show a sword, like, aligning with its true master? Would the sword light up? Would it burn its victim to kind of imprint, like, its mark on them? Like, that's why I'm thinking, yes, Nikki thinks that Ziling is the true master, but I think naturally, because you want to make your protagonist special, she would have to be the wielder of the sword, right? I mean, I'm not overstretching here, because usually that's the whole purpose of your protagonist. Your protagonist is usually like the center of whatever the bigger mystery is that you're creating around them. So that's kind of where I'd go with it there. And then I did mention this before, but the next question is Nikki actually having hallucinations of Pei-Ling, or is she like communicating with her spirit and not realizing she actually is, and she thinks it's just her grieving that's bringing these hallucinations onto her? Like, what's going on? Because like I said before, it looked like there were at times where like her being burned by the sword, her getting cut by it maybe could have unlocked something within Nikki. And they talk about the sword wielding this power on its true master kind of a thing. So I'm wondering if like what if one of the powers was her being able to commune with the dead or something, and it's not just like a figment of your imagination, but like you're actually like they're there with you, giving you advice kind of a thing. So I'm wondering to like, what is the reasoning behind Pei-Ling's apparitions? Is it because Nikki has the power to call upon and communicate with the dead, and she is just brushing it off as like grief hallucinations, or like what's going on? I have no idea. But I'd like to see how that would go. Also, another question. I guess this one's not going to be more of a question, but something I'm going to really applaud was the fact that I do come from an Asian background. So for me to watch the show, I actually got a lot more emotional than I thought I would. So I guess I'll call this like overall feedback or thoughts. I didn't think I'd actually get as emotional as I did. So when it came to like Nikki's conversation with her mom, and then like her conversation with her brother, and then it got very emotional for me. And then to have her parents confess about like how they got the money, and like that, it was just like the true sentiment behind like what they're trying to hide things to protect each other. They're trying to bear it for themselves so that nobody else had to do it. And then like it was just like, it was very close to home for some elements. I'm not going to say like it was really like spot on, but it was close to home in the sense that it got more of emotion out of me than I thought it would. And I thought that was like a huge thing. So it's just like, I'm very excited to see what else this show not only brings, because it's also something where like I would love to learn a little bit more about my own culture. So even going through that would be interesting to see. But it would also just be interesting to see how else they represent the elements of the culture that I do know. So I'm very excited to see how this moves forward. It's also just going to be very interesting to see Nikki doing all these martial arts, because those are not easy. I tried doing karate as a kid. I did not have the patience or the strong footwork to do it. But it'll be very interesting to see how that moves forward, and to see how her siblings support her. So I'm very looking forward to that. I can't wait to see when the parents get brought into the fold for it. I can't wait to learn more about this legend with the swords, because I'm a huge mythology nerd. I love it when anything mythological comes into play, because I want to know whether or not, like, is there truth behind it? Is there, like, a true source material behind it? Or is it something completely made up? And, like, just diving into that. So I'm really looking forward to see what the show has to bring. As far as predictions, we definitely know that her search for the 8 swords and for Zayling is definitely going to be a huge season over arc that she's going to be working on. I don't know if, like, it's going to be interesting to see if they're going to, because I'm assuming it's only going to be 13 episodes in season 1. It's going to be interesting, and it's going to be very fast-paced if they're meant to, like, cover all 8 swords in the first season. That'd be, like, huge. If anything, it'd be interesting to see, like, if they do each sword a season, then that's going to be a little slow-paced. But, like, if it's, like, doubling up or so, it's going to be interesting to see just how they cover it. And then, like, because we definitely know there's some beef between Zayling and Pei-Ling. And because, like, she killed her. And, like, from the brief interaction we got to see with them, it looked like Zayling also studied at the monastery. So it will be interesting to figure out what that dynamic was about, where the betrayal started between them, and like how she ended up, like what led her to come back to kill potentially her own mentor. So I'm interested to see that. As far as the community itself with Nikki, I'm wondering if word's going to spread about her martial arts, or if people are going to keep that under wraps, or like is she also going to be searching for fights? Because initially I thought, like, with the promo, like, maybe she gets more involved in it because, like, maybe she's part of the police force or something, or she's part of some enforcement, because I don't think she's going to become, like, a vigilante like you think with, like, the costumes and stuff like that. But then to what extent, like, is she going to be looking for these troubles, or are these troubles going to be looking for her? Would be the question I would have. But otherwise, I'll definitely find out when the next episode airs on Wednesday the 14th. Looking forward to that. But I'm going to leave it at there, guys. What did you guys think of this episode? What did you guys like about it? What do you think will happen next? Are you going to be tuning in? I hope so. It's definitely a show that we need right now. But let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear your own thoughts, theories, and opinions about that. Also, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and check out my other videos if you haven't done so already. If you want, check out my Tumblr page. Link for that is down below. I read blog promos, web clips, quotes, gifs, synopsis news, all the good stuff, all found one place. Go check that out. I'm not sure if I'm going to include Tumblr, or not Tumblr. I'm going to include Kung Fu on my Tumblr. I mean, yes, if it pops up on my dashboard, I'll definitely reblog it, but am I going to outright go searching for it like I do with some of the other shows I follow? Don't know just yet. I'm not on Tumblr as often as I used to be when I started it, but it's great there for a resource when I want to check back on certain things. But anyways, WordPress, link for that is down below. Anything I connect on WordPress, or anything I post online is connected on WordPress. A little more organized, a little more detailed, but still a work in progress again. Also, when it comes to Kung Fu, I'm not going to do weekly recaps or episodic recaps like I do with my other shows, just because, like I said, I'm starting a new program. It's requiring a lot more required readings from me. It's like very more essay-based than the previous creative writing base that I was in. But I definitely wanted to talk about the premiere because I had to study so much about it. But then I think I'm going to come back for the season 1 finale to kind of like bookend it, see how things progress. And it'll just be interesting to see like how, instead of getting like the play-by-play each week, it'll just be interesting to see like how the two, what I started off with my feelings, if any of my predictions turned out to be true, versus the second part. With that said though, I'm thinking, would it be too far-fetched if Zhang was the daughter of Pei Ling? And she thought like maybe she was meant to be the rightful heir for something, but her mother kept it from her. And then that kind of led to resentment and her going down a dark path. And then her actually taking the sword, thinking that it's her own, and then killing her mother in it. Would that be too far-fetched? I'm putting it out there. If that ends up being what the dynamic was between the two of them, there's that. Also, for some reason, there's a few other shows and movies that come to mind with that kind of a dynamic where like the protagonist's mentor is guarding some mythical object, and then their previous student, who was very gifted, wanted that object for themselves, but then they were denied it, and they came back with revenge to get it for themselves instead. A few shows and movies come to mind for that. Anyways, I digress. I'm going to stop because my throat really hurts now. But guys, I hope you check out Kung Fu Wednesdays on the CW at, what is it, 8 o'clock? Yeah, 8 o'clock p.m., 8 p.m. Check that out. Very interesting to see how things go. But until then, guys, this is Mel. Wish you all a great day, great week wherever you are. Please stay safe during this pandemic. Please wear a mask. Please stay physically distant from each other, but that doesn't mean you have to be socially distant. Text people, video chat with them. Do what you can. If you have to see them face to face, just keep the distance or keep the mask on. Just keep on doing that until everyone is vaccinated and having that same level of protection. Because I, for one, want to get out of this lockdown. I want to see the sun again, and I've been stuck in a condo building this whole time. So, until next time, guys, take care. Bye for now.